£60,000 of diamonds against your collarbone, ermine sliding off your left shoulder because the dress was sewn 6 weeks ago for a body 3 storms thinner. The pearls keep slipping. Then the slipper finds the stone. You are 17 years old. You arrived in London 6 hours ago. You met the man you're about to marry in a garden at 3:15 this afternoon. You do not speak his language. He does not speak yours. It is 9 o'clock at night, September 8th, 1761. The Chapel Royal at St. James's Palace. The Archbishop of Canterbury is waiting. This is your wedding. What begins tonight will end 57 years from now in a black chair, the household tapes shut after you, so no one ever sits in it again. Between then and now, a husband who runs through these gardens like prey, a daughter who hides a baby, an Act of Parliament that puts you in legal custody of a king. None of it filmed, none of it on Netflix. The man at the altar is George III, 22 years old, 10 months on the throne of Great Britain. He has waited 8 months for you to be selected from a short list of 7 Protestant German princesses. The girl in the gallery is Sophia Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz, the youngest daughter of an obscure North German duke. The marriage that begins here is the longest royal marriage in British history. The version Netflix filmed is not what the documents say. The version the documents say is what this channel was built to find. 57 years and 70 days, 15 children, 13 survivors. It will end with this same girl, 57 years older, sitting upright in that tape chair because dropsy has swollen her body so much she can no longer lie down, with a husband locked in a different palace who does not know she is dying, with straw laid across the cobblestones of Windsor Castle so the wheels of her funeral carriage will not reach his ears. Tap subscribe if you'd rather know what the documents actually say than what Netflix put on screen. You probably came here because of Bridgerton, because of Golda Rosheuvel and India Amarteyfio playing the Queen as a black woman at the centre of a Regency romance. The girl in the dress that doesn't fit is not that Charlotte. The story you're about to hear is documented. It is also worse. Before we get to her, first a theory you've already heard. The one Netflix sold a generation. The idea that Charlotte had African ancestry began with the German scholar Brunhold Springer in 1929. Then the Jamaican-American writer J.A. Rogers in 1940. Both read African heritage in her Ramsay portraits. Broad nose, full lips. It became popular history in 1996 through Mario de Valdes y Cocom, whose article for PBS Frontline traced Charlotte's lineage back 15 generations to a 13th century Portuguese woman called Madragana, whom Valdes identified as a Moor, and therefore, in his reading, African. In 2020, Netflix's Bridgerton and its 2023 spin-off, Queen Charlotte. A Bridgerton Story turned the theory into the version of her most people now carry in their heads. Here is what the academic record says. The British historian Andrew Roberts has called the claim utter rubbish. Kate Williams of King's College London has called the generational distance ridiculous. The University of Pennsylvania scholar Anya Lumba has pointed out that Moor in 16th and 17th century English meant Muslim, not black, and that Madragana herself was almost certainly Iberian Motarab, not sub-Saharan African. The math is also blunt. 15 generations between them put Madragana's contribution to Charlotte's genome at roughly 1 part in 32,000. Most decisively, not one of Charlotte's contemporaries, not Rowlandson, not Gilray, not Walpole, not the foreign ambassadors who described her in dispatches, ever depicted or described her as black. The single near-contemporary reference is from Baron Stockmar, who arrived at court in 1816 and described the 72-year-old queen in the final stages of dropsy as having a real mulatto face. Stockmar used the same dismissive register for her grown children. So she was not the Black Queen of Bridgerton. She was something else. And the something else has gone untold for 2 centuries because it is much harder to film. To understand what happened to her, you have to understand who picked her. When King George II died in October 1760, his grandson George inherited the throne at 22, unmarried, with a court full of advisors who agreed on one thing: whoever the new king married must not have political opinions. The previous 2 Hanoverian queens had run shadow governments. The decisive voice belonged to John Stuart, 3rd Earl of Bute, George's tutor, mentor, and his most trusted minister. Bute drew up a shortlist of 7 Protestant German princesses. Most were eliminated within weeks. The early favourite, Princess Philippina of Brandenburg-Schwedt, was struck off when discreet inquiries reported her as moody and stubborn. Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz was added, in the words of Brooke, almost as an afterthought. The duchy was so obscure that Horace Walpole later joked he could not find it on a map without a magnifying glass. Bute's recommendation to the king is preserved. He described Charlotte to George as amiable and as capable of taking any impression and being moulded into any form. Read that recommendation again. It is not the language of a matchmaker. It is the language of a man choosing wax. The asset being assessed is not a person, but a surface. The desirable property is not character. It is the absence of character. For the next 25 years, the recommendation held. Then it stopped. That is the document the next 57 years grow out of. For the first 25 years, the contract held. Charlotte arrived speaking no English and learned it. She bore her first child 11 months after the wedding, in August 1762, the future George IV. By the time she was 35, she had given birth 15 times. She was good at the things you could be good at without making decisions. She read in 3 languages. She practiced the harpsichord with Johann Christian Bach, the youngest son of Johann Sebastian. In April 1764, an 8-year-old Mozart played at her court and sang an aria with her at the keyboard. The following January, Leopold Mozart published his son's 6 Opus 3 sonatas with a dedication to her. She sent 50 guineas. She turned Kew Gardens into one of the great botanical projects of the 18th century, working with Joseph Banks after his return from Cook's first Pacific voyage. A South African flower from the new collection was named Strelitzia reginae in her honour. In 1809, she became patron of the General Lying in Hospital in West London. It was renamed for her. Today, it is Queen Charlotte's and Chelsea Hospital, one of the oldest maternity hospitals in Britain. She wrote letters to her brother in Mecklenburg-Strelitz, to her daughter, who married into Württemberg. The correspondence is preserved at the British Library and at the Hauptstaatsarchiv in Stuttgart. The letters describe loneliness. They describe boredom. They describe a woman who had been told on her wedding day never to involve herself in politics, and who kept that promise. In October 1788, the contract broke. Bute had been wrong. The king started the summer with stomach pain. By autumn, he was talking for hours without stopping, foaming at the mouth, addressing trees as if they were ambassadors of foreign courts. He sexually accosted women at Windsor. He spent Christmas Day 1788 holding a cushion he believed to be his dead son, Octavius. The royal physicians could not cope. In December, a 69-year-old Lincolnshire clergyman named Francis Willis was sent for. Willis ran what was effectively a private mental health franchise out of his rural parish. Half hospital, half profitable confinement. He believed mental illness was caused by overexcitement and could be cured by control. The treatments Willis used are part of the historical record. What followed in the Queen's Wing barely survived it. Willis ordered the king strapped into a strait waistcoat. He ordered him gagged when he raved. He ordered him bound to a chair the king himself bitterly named his throne. Attendants beat him for misbehaviour. He was fed mashed food with a wooden spoon as punishment, and given access to his library as reward. He was blistered with arsenic-laden powders to draw the madness out. None of it worked. Most of it almost certainly made him worse. While this was happening to her husband in one wing of Kew Palace, Charlotte was pacing in another. Her keeper of the robes, the novelist Frances Burney, who had taken the job 2 years earlier and was finding it both physically and emotionally crushing, recorded the Queen moaning to herself with what Burney called a desponding sound. "What will become of me? What will become of me?" Burney watched the Queen's hair go white in 5 months. By the end of February 1789, the wardrobe assistant Charlotte Papendiek wrote that the Queen was much changed, her hair quite grey. By March 1789, the King had recovered enough to address Parliament. By then, Parliament had drafted what became the Regency Bill of 1789. The bill was never passed because the King got better, but the document is what matters. If George III should ever again be declared incapable, the bill specified, the Prince of Wales would assume the regency, but the King himself, his court, and his minor children would be placed under the legal guardianship of the Queen. For the first time in British history, a Queen consort was being given legal custody of a sitting monarch. Charlotte, the woman selected for moldability, the woman who had been ordered on her wedding day never to meddle in politics, was being given legal control over the most important body in the kingdom. The mechanism was unprecedented. She had been chosen because she was supposed to be incapable of holding power. Now she held the only kind of power that remained when the King's mind had dissolved. She used it. She moved the King from Kew to Windsor and controlled who entered his rooms. She kept her eldest son, the Prince of Wales, waiting impatiently to declare a permanent regency in his own favour, out of his father's apartments for weeks. She aligned with Pitt's Tory ministry against her son's Whig allies. She told the head physician what to write in the King's medical bulletins. Her lady-in-waiting, Lady Harcourt, later recorded the Queen overruling Dr. Warren and inserting the phrase, "His Majesty is in a more comfortable state," into a public statement. In the satirical prints of late 1788 and early 1789, she was caricatured for the first time as a manipulator, a German queen in collusion with Pitt, stepping on the Prince of Wales's emblem of 3 white feathers, plotting her own regency. Public attacks. Until 1788 she had been celebrated for domesticity. Her reputation never recovered. What follows is the most documented description, in English, of what life inside a mad king's palace was actually like. The woman who wrote it dressed the Queen. Frances Burney, 36 years old when the King collapsed, was the most successful living English novelist when her family pressured her to take the position of second keeper of the robes in 1786. She hated the work. The hours were brutal. The protocol was dehumanising, but she could observe. Her journal entry for the morning of February 2nd, 1789, is the most documented account we have of what it actually meant to live in a palace where the King could not be predicted. That morning Burney asked Dr. John Willis, son of the chief physician, where in the garden she might walk safely. The King was supposedly in Richmond. Burney went into Kew Gardens. Halfway through her walk she saw, through trees, 2 or 3 figures. It was the King. She turned and ran. Behind her she heard the King's voice, loudly and hoarsely, calling her name. Miss Burney, Miss Burney. She heard footsteps, the King and his attendants, and the 2 doctors all running after her, the doctors shouting at the King not to heat himself so unmercifully. Other voices, shriller though less nervous, called out, "Stop, stop, stop." She wrote, "Heavens, how I ran. My feet were not sensible that they even touched the ground." A grown woman with the Queen's permission, running through the Queen's gardens because the permission was wrong. This was not a household in trouble. This was the household. This is how it ran. The king recovered in 1789. He relapsed in 1801. He relapsed again in 1804. Each return was worse than the last. By 1804, he was violent. Charlotte had begun avoiding him for her own physical safety. The historian Janice Hadlow, drawing on the royal correspondence, has documented that during these episodes, the king frequently expressed his repulsion for the queen, an unbearable detail in light of what their marriage had been for the first 27 years. Charlotte was sleeping in a barricaded chamber. She made her unmarried daughters sleep in her bed at night, so she would not be alone if the king walked in. The 6 daughters were kept at home into their 30s and 40s, banned from marrying because the queen feared the topic would push the king back into psychosis, named the household themselves the Nunnery. Princess Sophia, the 5th daughter, became pregnant in secret around 1800 by her father's 56-year-old equerry, Major General Thomas Garth. The child was taken at birth and raised in foster care under the supervision of the king's private secretary at Weymouth. Charlotte, by all the family's testimony, never spoke of it. The queen, who had been chosen for moldability, was now running a household whose own children referred to it as a convent, and whose youngest daughter had hidden a baby. This is the year it stopped being recoverable. October 1810. The youngest princess, Amelia, 27 years old and the king's favourite child, died of tuberculosis. Within days, the king collapsed into the final episode he would never return from. In 1811, Parliament passed the Regency Act. The Prince of Wales became Prince Regent. Charlotte was confirmed as the king's legal guardian. She held that position for the rest of her life. She could not bring herself to see him. After June 1812, she did not visit her husband again. She managed the institution of him from a distance, through equerries and physicians. She held the legal authority of the British monarchy through 6 more years. The king, locked at Windsor, held imaginary conversations with his dead children and played the harpsichord in rooms with the curtains drawn. In June 1818, the chair appears. Charlotte stopped at Kew Palace on her way back from London to Windsor. She was 74. Dropsy had swollen her legs and torso so badly she could no longer lie down to sleep. Her sons, William, Duke of Clarence, and Edward, Duke of Kent, were married in the drawing room at Kew on July 11, 1818, in a double ceremony arranged so their dying mother could attend. The wedding party went on without her into the dining room. The Prince Regent, her eldest son, the same son with whom she had fought a 30-year war over her husband's care, commissioned a black horsehair reclining chair so she could be wheeled between her bedroom and her boudoir. On November 16th, she said to her daughters, in the version Flora Fraser preserves from the family correspondence, "Tell them I love them. I wish I was near the dear king." She died the next morning, November 17th, 1818, sitting upright in the horsehair chair, the Prince Regent holding her hand. The chair is still in her bedroom at Kew Palace today, with a piece of tape across the seat. The housekeeper placed it there after the Queen's death, so no one would sit in it. Her coffin was moved to Windsor on December 2nd for burial in the Royal Vault at St George's Chapel. The cobblestones of the courtyards at Windsor Castle were covered with straw. The household was concerned the noise of the funeral procession might distress the king. It was not necessary. He did not know who she was anymore. He had not known for years. He died 14 months later, on January 29th, 1820, having never been told that his wife was dead. Charlotte's son, the Prince Regent, became George IV. He died in 1830, with no surviving legitimate children. Her other son, William, became William IV. He died in 1837 with no surviving children. The throne passed to her granddaughter, Alexandrina Victoria, the only legitimate heir to come out of the panicked 1818 marriages. Held in Charlotte's drawing room while she was dying, Queen Victoria, who reigned for 63 years and gave her name to an era, owed her throne to her grandmother's deathbed. And in 2023, Netflix released Queen Charlotte, a Bridgerton story. It became one of the most watched limited series in the platform's history. It is the version of her most people now carry in their heads. Here is what was done with her. She was selected by men who needed something pliable and got something more durable than they intended. She was reframed 2 centuries later by people who needed a symbol and made her into one she would not have recognised. The Earl who picked her wanted wax. The streaming series wanted a pioneer. Both versions erased the same person. What the documents show, Walpole's letters, the Harcourt manuscripts, Burney's journals, the daughter's correspondence, is a woman who was never asked, ever, what she wanted. She crossed an ocean at 17 and married a stranger 6 hours after she met him. She bore 15 children and learned 3 languages and built a botanical garden that is still working. She watched a man she had loved for half her life become someone she could not be in a room with. She held the legal authority of the British monarchy for nearly a decade because there was no one else. She died in a chair with 2 of her daughters beside her in a palace 10 miles from a husband who had forgotten her name. The slipper that crossed 3 storms to reach the chapel ended on cobblestones laid with straw 57 years later, so the king would not hear it. The straw was the only mercy anyone had thought to spare him in 22 years. None of it was meant for her. The chair at Kew with the tape across its seat still sits in her bedroom. The hospital named for her still operates in West London. The botanical garden she built with Joseph Banks is still the largest in the world. We kept all of her things. The woman who walked in 3 storms thinner is the only thing we did not keep.